Good day to you, Lora Johnson, along with you. As we kind of think about the holidays, what are some of the unique Christmas gifts that you can give for your loved one? Well, for the people here around the Ileana area, very well known with Max Armstrong, he has just released his book, Stories from the Heartland. And I have with me, well, the one and only man, myth, legend, not really a myth because you're standing right here, Max Armstrong. How are you doing today, sir?
Hi, Laura. How are you?
Hey, doing pretty good. So what led you to say, you know what? I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book about some of my stories.
Well, I'm a reluctant author, I must admit. I've told these stories to people over the years, stories of folks that I meet along the way. And Steve and Diane, who are have a publishing company in Chicago, came to me, and they did Orion Samuelson's book a couple of years ago, and they said, we got to get this together in a book. And I said, yeah, sure, whatever. So finally, they kept priming the pump, trying to get me to open up, and they would call me and say, tell us a story. And that's just how it came to pass, basically. I wrote some of it, but much of it was those folks interviewing me and pulling it out of me.
Well, and you have plenty of stories to tell, considering you've been all over, essentially, the Heartland, with lots of stories between being part of the WGN family and then moving on with RFD, and then also, right now we work this week in agribusiness. It gives you the opportunity to go a lot of places and hear a lot of stories, too.
Yeah, we've been blessed. We've originated broadcast from more than 30 different nations in every state in America, and yeah, we run into some interesting people. There's a story in the book about how we lost a television camera in Brazil. Now, back in the day, television cameras weren't $4,000 items. The camera we lost in Foz do Iguaçu, Brazil, was a $50,000 camera. And it was stolen from the bus we were in, and we offered a reward and got it back. But it took all night long to get the camera back at the police station because the police officers there in that town threw a party. They called up their wives and said, bring pizza and soft drinks and beer. We're having a party with the Americanos.
Well, and in the meantime, you guys are probably very, very nervous about losing this $50,000 piece of equipment.
We were. We offered a reward out on the street, and it was a very crowded city. I mean, you could feel the hands going into your pockets. The pickpockets were working the crowd very aggressively. And we got back to the bus, and the camera had been stolen. That sinking feeling of a $60,000 piece of equipment. We went to the nearest police officer, offered a reward. He put it on the radio, and we had that camera back in 15 minutes. We had it, well, the police had it back. They turned it over to us about 5 hours later after the party at the police station.
Well, at least you got a party out of it, right?
That's right. Strange way to spend a Saturday night in Brazil.
Well, and there's many stories like that here, and you spend a lot of time broadcasting, of course, has been your love, and I actually have one of the titles of IRA broadcaster.
Right. Well, I've been so blessed to live my dream, and I guess that's basically the story that we're talking about there. As a kid, 7 or 8 years old, in the old farmhouse in southern Indiana, I'd sit in the closet and play radio, and I dreamt of being on the radio in Chicago, and I give thanks every day to the opportunity that I've had to live my dream and to meet so many wonderful people along the way, including the folks right in the WITY listening area.
Well, and speaking of those that are in the WITY listening area, you have a special chapter that is dedicated to another good buddy of ours, Darius Harms.
Yeah, I write a whole chapter about Darius because he's had such a significant impact on my life. And I point out, I say in the book that he's probably the best friend I have other than my wife. But 10,000 people would say the same thing. I mean, he has touched that many lives. He is such a wise gentleman. He's counseled me on a number of things, not just agricultural knowledge. I've learned so much from him about agriculture, but life in general. I've started logging Dariusisms on my phone. When he shares with me a quote, I'm starting to keep track of them now so that I'll have them for the rest of my days.
Well, and even whenever you visit around the area, whether you're coming into Gordyville to do special events, you do get a chance to stay what you like to call the Ponderosa over in Penfield. Kind of puts you a little bit close to where Darius is, too.
Yeah, I like being in the community by all means. This region, I just really, really like the people of this region. I've always felt at home here. Folks have welcomed me in, and I've spent a lot of time here, understandably so, because I like the people so much, and that's why I keep coming back all the time. That's why it's hard for you folks to get rid of me.
Well, I don't think we ever want to get rid of you anyway.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that so much. It's and to have great broadcasting friends like you folks at WITY, it just means a lot to me. And whether I'm going up Highway 1 or across 74 or on over to 63, I mean, I'm never far from somebody I know, and there's something pretty neat about that. As I travel 136, at any one point I can stop and think, all right, just 2 miles away, there's somebody I know, or a mile up this road. If I have car trouble, I can stop there, and that's pretty cool.
Well, and even whenever you are close by here, you don't know a stranger, and people are consistently coming up to you and just wanting to shake your hand, thanking you for the time that you have spent in broadcasting, for the decades that you've been in it. And speaking of which, I mean, there's actually one picture that I noticed that you talk about having a history in broadcasting. You actually had to have a special identification by the Chicago Police Department.
I had a Chicago Police Department press pass for some reason. I'm not sure why the farm broadcaster needed one, but there's a picture of it in my book with a photograph of me on the press pass. I guess, if a cattle truck turned over on the expressway and I needed to cover it, I had the identification there. Or if there were protesters that showed up at the Board of Trade, which did happen in the early 80s when the farm economy was not very good. The American agriculture movement came to town to protest. In fact, that brought back a memory. Just about 2 weeks ago, there was a protest in Chicago at the CME Group, which is now parent company of the old Board of Trade. These were protesters saying that the exchanges should be taxed more and the money should be turned over to the poor people of the state. And it brought back memories. I thought, that's not the first protest that they've had in the futures markets in Chicago.
Well, at least you don't have to have a police identification card anymore either.
No, that's true too. And I'm thinking back. I'm not sure I ever used that card at all. I don't think I ever had to use it, had to flash it, had to show it to anybody. But I had it if I needed it.
Well, and for as many miles as you've traveled, now you've traveled mainly in a car, but you actually put a lot of work and a lot of miles on your boots, and boots that you will never get rid of. There's a picture of the boots, but many places you're shown wearing them.
Yeah, those, and I'm not wearing them today. I actually have a nicer boot on today, but I wore those. The last time I wore them in this area was at the Half Century of Progress. I also wore them at the I&I show. Then I got over to the Farm Progress show at Decatur, and the sole was flapping on the thing. And I thought, wait a minute, I have to do something about this. I was picking up wood chips between the sole and the bottom of my foot there. So I thought, okay, maybe I better glue these things. So they're at home today. I decided I better wear something that was a little bit nicer.
So it's gotten repair jobs, but they're not retired just yet.
They are not retired. It's so hard because they fit so doggone well. It's so hard to break in a pair of boots. I bought a pair of boots from a well-known boot company to replace those that are pictured on the cover of the book, and now they told me how to break them in and everything. And I'm only now, about 2 years later, starting to feel a little more comfortable in them.
So it's just going to need another 20 years in order for you to, get into it for real.
Yeah, they become a part of you. You kick stuff with them, you shove stuff with them. They've gone a lot of places with me, I have to say.
Well, and your book, Stories from the Heartland, now I'm sure that they're available how?
Well, folks can go to the website, which is maxarmstrongbook.com. And it's like $21.95 or something like that. Here at the show at Gordyville, we had a show special for $20. But folks can go online to maxarmstrongbook.com. They can also go to Amazon if they're used to doing business with Amazon, and their financial information is in there, and they feel more comfortable doing it that way. I think it's just a little more expensive, $24.95 or something like that. But they can order it through Amazon too if they care to. And I'm very appreciative. Just honored to be able to share these stories with folks. I just feel so fortunate to have had this history to pass along.
Well, and not only sharing the stories, but again, all of the pictures that are a part of the stories too, because you could share a story how many times that you want to, but having just all of the history that you have in the form of pictures just makes it even better.
Yeah, and some of the photographs, for example, deal with the deadliest tornado in American history. My dad survived what was called the Tri-State Tornado. He was a boy of 7 coming from the school in a wagon pulled by horses when that tornado came out of Missouri, went across southern Illinois, and in the last 20 miles of its path, it hit the wagon the dad was in, turned the wagon over, the kids were in the ditch, and they were safe. That tornado, when it finished up 20 miles later, had taken the lives of 698 people. on the afternoon of March 18th of 1925. There's never been one that has killed more people in the United States, but you have to remember we had no communication. There were very few radios, very few radio stations back in the day, so when that tornado hit a town, it would wipe out the telegraph lines, and there was no way to communicate to the next town that the twister was coming through. And it took out quite a swath. When I was a boy growing up, you could still see some of the tin up in the trees 40 years after the tornado. In fact, the trees had grown around the tin. You would look up and you'd see a piece of tin right out of the middle of a trunk of a tree.
Well, it's just kind of a story of survival then.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I'm so thankful that Dad survived it, obviously. I wouldn't be here today. But it's one of those stories we pass along with some photographs. The interesting thing about it from the standpoint of agriculture was that a Farm Bureau representative in the area called International Harvester in Chicago, or sent him a telegram probably, and he said, we have a mess down here. It's March 18th, well, 19th, 20th, whatever the days would have been just after the tornado. In a few days, we're going to be planting the crops. Our horses were killed. Our equipment was destroyed that we have no way to put in the crops. International immediately loaded up McCormick Deering tractors on flatbed rail cars and shipped them to southern Indiana. And there's some photographs in there of the long lines of tractors. We displayed some of those photographs at the Half Century of Progress, too, this year. It was 90 years ago. In fact, this is the 90th anniversary of that tornado.
And that just comes to show that whether it was back then 90 years ago or even today, the community effort that you come together in a time of need whenever you're in the agriculture community.
Well, we have a chapter on that too in the book, Laura, as a matter of fact, about farmers whenever somebody is really struggling, when they've lost a member of the family or because of illness, they can't bring in the crop. Everybody shows up at one time with millions of dollars worth of equipment, and they get the job done. And there are a couple of stories about that in Stories from the Heartland, too. For all of the changes that have taken place in rural America, and as competitive as it is today, we still haven't, for the most part, lost that cohesiveness of being good neighbors, and I hope we don't.
And again, what's that website if they want to get your book?
MaxArmstrongBook.com.
That was really good. You might be a barcaster.
I hope to be on the radio someday.
I think so too.
Maybe this is my audition.
I think you may pass. I'll have to go talk to the powers that be.
AM 980 WITY, Danville.
See, we need to get him on the air more often, right? Yeah, thank you so much. This is Max Armstrong. And, of course, you can catch him also every weekday on WITY for Farm Progress America as well as your Midwest Digest. So Max Armstrong's Stories from the Heartland, a great holiday gift. So make sure that you get your copy today. For WITY, I'm Lora Johnson.